Hello, this is School Committee Update today with Ward 1 member Emily Ackman. I'm Sarah Fishman. How are you doing, Emily?
I am well today on this very foggy day. How about you?
Ditto in both ways. It was very creepy last night.
Honestly, even this morning, taking my kids to school, it was a little, yes, there was an eeriness to it.
So let's start with that. This is the first one of these shows this school year. So very quick background on you as a SPS mom and school committee member. So you have two kids?
I do.
What grades?
They're both in first grade at Healy.
Oh, are they twins?
They are not. They're 11 months apart.
Wow.
Yes.
Interesting. Very interesting.
That is why I have two and no more.
I see. Okay. And how long have you been on the school committee?
I'm finishing out my 5th year.
Wow.
I'm in the middle of my 3rd term.
Okay. And what subcommittees do you chair?
I do not chair any subcommittees. I'm the vice chair of finance.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm the vice chair. We have a joint subcommittee with the district on sort of building maintenance. I'm the vice chair from the school committee side. And then I also represent the school committee. We're a member of something called the Shore Collaborative, which is an intensive special education collaborative where we send some of our SPS students, and I represent the Somerville School Committee on the Shore for the Shore Collaborative.
Okay, great. So I want to start discussing first issue, the search for a new school superintendent. So first off, are there school committee people who are like point people for this effort who are leading it?
Yeah, you're talking to one.
Okay.
So we had a subcommittee to choose the vendor who is going to do the searches, do the initial interviews, review resumes. And it's a center out of UMass Boston. Forgive me, I can't think of the name right now, is who we chose. So there was a subcommittee chosen to do that work, and then a separate subcommittee that's being chosen, which I will be chairing to, I guess I'm chairing the superintendent search subcommittee now that I think about it. Sorry, it's a relatively new development.
That's a major hunk of cheese there, whatever.
It is, and it's, I have a doctorate in education policy and evaluation, and actually have a license to be a superintendent. So I have some sense of like the needs and skill set, hopefully.
So you're a superwoman.
It means that I'm fortunate in that my professional experience aligns with my school committee work, and I love that. And I feel very fortunate for that. But yeah, so I will be chairing the subcommittee for the search. The organization that we brought to do the search, they will, we actually have a meeting set up later this week to sort of start the dialogue about working with them, getting postings out. And then we don't have a timeline just yet. Our priority is community involvement, community input into what we're looking for. Mary Skipper is an amazing human being and was with us for, sort of given the current culture of the superintendency for a relatively long time. And so she left a mark and did wonderful things. And so what do we want in that like next generation, for lack of a better way of putting it, as Somerville has been changing rapidly and sort of continues to change and adapt.
So that was going to be my next question. So first of all, she was school superintendent in Somerville for about 7 years, I think. Mm-hmm. And now she's school superintendent at the Boston Public Schools. And there was 1 month where she was both, I think. So did that make the transition to the interim person easier or harder? I just can't imagine doing both of those things at the same time.
Yes, I think, and she also unfortunately got COVID during that time.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that. Jeez.
yeah, and a bad case of it. Like she was put out. But thankfully, her interim on the Somerville side is now her I can't remember the term, but the acting, I think, was his title before he became interim. They had worked together for years closely. Jeff Curley was one of very few people who sort of could get that like unanimous support, not just from the school committee, but from just many, many members of our community, to step into that role. I think he was her chief of staff, and they shared an office for years prior to the pandemic. So he knew her inner workings, but I think, there were just a few things that, especially due to like, sensitive legal issues that he wasn't included in, that she was able to support and walk him through. And my understanding of how it happened is, if a major challenge came up, she initially was like, well, here's how I handle it. And then after a few weeks, Jeff started to say like, all right, here's how I'm going to handle this challenge. And, would sort of get the feedback from Mary. And so that's what gradually, supported him into this role.
So I'm going to read something that Laura Patone, the Ward 5 school committee member, wrote on her Facebook page last month about the sort of the qualities or the skills of the superintendent. So she was talking about Mary Skipper leaving, and she said, all my gratitude to Superintendent Skipper for her 7 years of service. She elevated the human capital strategy to attract and retain amazing educators, led equity initiatives, introduced targeted programming for multilingual and at-risk students, and always strived to put students first. So you're nodding your head, presumably you agree with all that. Is there any other quality that either you as a school committee member or the school committee as a whole is going to seek out in the search process for the next superintendent?
So I'm going to yes, and like everything that my colleague, Ms. Patone, said. I would say what will be big for me is vision, because, Mary's improvements on at-risk students, like finding programs to target and support them early so they can be supported and get through school. Her focus on students first. I think students first will be a priority for any superintendent candidate, definitely. But I think vision, and like Mary came in with a vision, and through hard work and community building and, collaboration, executed on that. And so we're hoping for someone who's going to be here for a while again. And so I think, to me, like having someone who understands, where Mary brought us to, where Tony Parentazzi brought us to prior to Mary, and then says, here's where I think, Somerville will be going next, and here's my vision for helping to get you there. So I would say like vision, in addition to what Ms. Patone said.
Okay. So you already spoke of community involvement. So are there public hearings that are planned or will be planned for people to give input?
Yeah, so I will say they will be planned. Like legitimately, our first meeting to discuss the process, I think, is tomorrow. If not, it may be early next week. And so that, our goal is to, typically around this time of year, school committee has open office hours, and we do it around the city. We're probably going to do it a little bit later, like closer to the Thanksgiving holiday, in order to start that community input process, because we don't know what we need to know from the community yet. And we need to, sort of as a body get on the same page about that. And then, reach out to our constituents in the community and make sure that we are figuring out how to get translators, and that there's, opportunity for everyone who wants to have a say to give them the chance to provide input.
Okay.
Because our student body does not match that of our city. And so while it's, every constituent deserves a voice, we want to be sure that we're getting representation from, our students and their families.
Right. I was going to ask you about the translation access, so that's good you're doing that. So is there any other role for, say, someone who is not somehow attached to the schools but is a resident of Somerville? Will there be will the search group from the school, led by the school committee, will that be composed only of school committee or central administration people, or will there be any role for a community person, maybe an older person who doesn't have a child in the school, kind of thing?
So I would, in short, yes. I think that will come more when it comes to like reviewing resumes and interviewing. Like there are going to be multiple rounds. I should say, we can't predict the future. Ideally, there will be multiple rounds of interviews. Our goal is to cast a wide net. One of the things that happened with the firms, that when we put out our RFP, I don't know if, how widely we sort of publicized it, but we only got 2 viable bids. We chose one. I'm pleased, I think they're going to do great work, but I also wanted it to be a cautionary tale for us as a body. Like, you only get to pick from those who apply.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to be sure that we're, as many people who are qualified, who know about it, are hearing about it and are applying. That is my caveat to answer your question. Yes, like the goal with that is that we will have like multiple qualified candidates. We will need, members of our community to review resumes. Like, certainly it doesn't need to be someone with children in the system. Anyone who is invested in the community and is willing, the only ask would be that they are committed to the process, all of it, all the way through. Like, we all miss meetings at times because we have to, but you can't just like read resumes, give your feedback and be done. That we'd ask that you be part of, from the initial resume review through to candidate selection.
It's something that I'm individually interested in and have been for a long time. My son was K-12, graduated the high school several years ago. And there was, I believe, one time that I went to a public hearing for, maybe it was the high school principal at the time, in an older version of the high school's library. Mm-hmm. And there was a fire, and I believe Mark Niedergang stamped it out. So that was probably more exciting than normal, but and then I was on the search for a principal at the Brown School at one point. So I just was curious, even for my own self, if that was going to be possible. So that's great.
Yeah, like I said, the only ask is that whoever is involved is committed throughout the process. But yes, of course.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's talk about something else. Let's talk about T-passes.
Yeah.
So last year, you guys distributed about 1,200 T-passes, free T-passes to high schoolers. And this year, 7th and 8th graders can get them as well. You're probably going to pass out about 2,000, I think you guys said at the last school committee meeting. Mm-hmm. So what prompted the expansion? Did students or parents ask for it, or what made it come?
It's sort of like a twofold thing. There was an ask from families. It was our own sort of edification that the age cutoff for free riding with an adult, or a free ride, is around 6th grade. Mm-hmm. I think it's the age of 12, and so that's around 6th grade, which is why we decided to add the 7th and 8th. There was a need for it in the community. It came from students, it came from families, and then also realizing that giving it to the high school students is great, but there's a gap, a need gap, that we are working to fill. My understanding is they've been handed out, and I don't know if it's the district or the city, but each pass is like on record, and if they go unused, we can sort of cut it off after a certain point.
My next question, yes.
Yeah, and so just we want to use money well, and well meaning being fiscally savvy, as well as using it to help people as much as possible. And so my understanding is anyone who wants one is provided with one, but if it doesn't get used within a certain amount of time, it's either 14 or 30 days. I don't remember. Sort of like one cycle of payment for an unlimited pass, which I think is a 30-day cycle. That one is then it's closed. If a student needs it, maybe with a new semester or something changes, they can go to their main office and get it reactivated. My understanding is it shouldn't be too much hassle, but again, in order to be like conscientious fiscal stewards, we're making sure that when they get handed out that they're used.
So do you know how much it cost last year and how much it's projected to cost with the expansion this school year?
I don't remember the numbers. I'm sorry.
That's okay. And in terms of how it's being funded, is this, so to speak, trickle down money from federal economic recovery fund?
Yes.
Okay.
I think, and again, another reason that we will be hopefully having like really robust, engaging conversations is those federal dollars. I think they sunset at the end of next school year, so spring of 24. And so, we want to bring as much as possible onto the general fund as we can of the programs, of the services, of the supports. But we're going to need community input because it is not possible for it all to go into the general fund.
Okay. All right. So, and then there was something about if you were 12 years old, but you weren't in 7th grade, you could ask for one or something like that, you guys said?
Yes. Because that's really why, again, we dropped the to 7th and 8th grade, is to make sure that we were accounting for that gap for students who aged out of being able to ride for free per the T's policies.
Okay. All right. So now this is also a personally motivated question, but school committee meetings are still held remotely, whereas city council meetings are in person and have been for a while. And it's, at least for me, difficult to follow a school committee meeting online because they're, the Brady Bunch boxes and people are kind of small and you can't necessarily see the name all the time of who's there. I think you can when the person's speaking, but not otherwise. So is this difference between the school committee and the city council due to different COVID policies that the school versus city hall have, or what's the?
So the question is very timely because we just discussed it in our last meeting. There are multiple reasons for it. And I do want to push back a little bit. It's only the full council meetings twice a month.
Right.
That happen in person. So there's, there's lots of subcommittee meetings that are still happening remotely. For city council.
The city council, yes.
Yes.
Right.
Sorry, just to clarify, it's not all meetings, but it is full meetings. You are 100% correct. So there's multiple reasons that we sort of as a body have agreed to stay remote, at least as long as, I think we're going to discuss it again around February. But the first being translation. Our goal is to be transparent, to be able to be as inclusive as possible. And Zoom, the platform we use, has an option for translation services.
Mhm.
That is something Matt McLaughlin, who is the Ward 1 City Councilor, he's also the council president, and he joined our last school committee meeting, and so was able to engage, as someone, to your point, who has been back for a while. When you're in person, that translation service, it's harder to get them to come in person, so it's hard to do, and it's also hard. The way the platform works for broadcasting, we can't get it translated using the current technical platform that the city council chambers uses. So translation services are not possible, which is one of the reasons we've chosen to stay on Zoom. Another thing is that at each school committee meeting, there is, I'll say, like between 4 and 20 school and district staff who come and present to us about, amazing things that they're doing in the district. And, an educator's day typically starts at about 7:30. And so, many of them have made it clear to us that they see it as a benefit, that even if they're not engaging with their families, that being in their home space rather than going home and then having to go back out to the city council chambers is beneficial to them as people, who are going early. And so those are the two main reasons for now. We've thought about it, we've considered it, and we're going to stick with what we have for now. You're right, it's imperfect, but I mean, may I ask, because you said, again, this is something that has been a challenge for you. When you watch council meetings, that are held in person, do you find it easier?
Do I watch when I watch ones that are in person?
Yeah, just because you mentioned that the challenge to you is sort of that Brady Bunch.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I haven't gone to any recently, but I've long ago was freelance reporter for the Globe, and I covered them. So yes, in fact, since you bring it up, this dates me, but I would sit through the meeting, and if it was 11 o'clock and it still hadn't finished, I would go to the payphone and I would call my husband and say, please start videotaping the meeting. And then I would go back and get my stuff and then go home, and then I would watch what I missed.
Wow.
Yeah. So whatever, I just think when you're in person, it's more like it's real life. It's more, you see the people as people. And, but I think the translation point is important. So especially in the schools, because they're just, it makes sense. And you guys are really good at putting everything in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole, which are the most spoken languages, right?
Yes. And we work hard at that. And that's another sort of area of growth that Mary Skipper championed.
Right.
And so, that's the piece of it. And, while we're not pandemic educating, we're still, people are still pretty exhausted. And so,
but, and also the nature of how people work is different, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's more home-based now for certain people, for certain, mm-hmm. not for direct service people, but for people who can be computer-based.
Yes, my day job is a great example.
Yes. So I know this is not in your ward, but just briefly, the Brown School playground was supposed to be renovated starting, was it at the end of the summer or beginning of this school year? Mm-hmm. That's now been postponed. Why has it been postponed, and will there be a new time set, or is it?
My understanding is there's additional feasibility studies that are happening, and that's why it's being postponed.
Okay.
That construction happens on the city side, but again, it is an important question. The school deserves that. And but that's, my understanding is that there were questions about feasibility of, what I thought was a beautiful playground that had been designed.
Mhm.
And so it's a feasibility study.
Okay. And then sort of lastly, I'm just curious about this because it's hard sometimes to look at the city and the school committee websites and see, if how best to contact people. And you can't really email all the city council people at once. You have to click on each email address. And I think on the school committee side, you can't even do that. And last year, there were little bios for each of the school committee members, and now there aren't that. And then on the city.
I'm surprised. What are you looking at? Because I see the bios when I look at the.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I just missed it.
I know that there was, as we were updating our communications staff over the summer, there was a point where things were pretty behind, but that has been like, so to your point, I know that happened because I mentioned it over the summer, but I think that's all been updated.
But when you search, well, I don't want to get into details, but it's not as transparent as it could be sort of across the board for both the city and the school committee. We can talk more about this offline, or I can complain to my own school committee person. But in general, is it easier for people to contact you specifically through your school's email address, or do you use any social media platform in particular, or what's?
I mean, for me, I do use Facebook, but I would say email first, phone second, and my phone is on the website as well. I would encourage whoever's watching to just do an internet search for Somerville School Committee. I think all the information, I agree, there is no group email, but it should be if you click any of the links. The other thing is for parents to know all of our emails are much like a teacher. It's
Right.
First initial last name at k12.somerville.ma.us.
So yours is, and we can put this up on the screen, E Ackman, EACKMAN.
Correct.
At k12.somerville.ma.us. Okay, so
100%.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, on that note, I think we have to finish. This has been School Committee Update. Have a good day.